everyone. Welcome back to Britton's Hangout Hour episode. I think we're in the 40s now. I've kind of lost count. I'm here today with IWizard. Real name Jordan, if I remember right.
You got it.
He is a YouTuber. He's written some stuff. He's also run some other things, which I thought was interesting. And I found your channel. I'm like, we gotta talk at some point. So here we are.
Glad to be here.
So how you doing today? How you doing?
I'm doing awesome. It's a Sunday, and putting an episode out here pretty soon. Got some writing done. Got work tomorrow, but all's well. How about you, Britton?
I'm doing all right. It's the end of my fall break, so I'm just kind of chilling.
Where do you go to school?
I go to the University of Central Oklahoma. In Oklahoma is where I go.
Some Okie dude, I guess.
Yeah, no, I'm just begging to get doxxed right now. In all honesty, not really.
Oh, well, what do you say on here that you're worried about?
Oh, I'm just being silly. But you run a YouTube channel called IWizard, and I found your channel.
Yeah.
And I saw that you cover a lot of fantastical content, but I also saw that you had libertarian content, and that kind of struck a chord with me because coincidentally, before I used to have a gaming channel back in the day, but then I kind of got, I kind of moved on from that, and then I also had a political channel, which is awful, and I'm not going to tell anybody about it because a lot of the content on that old channel is not good. But I thought it was interesting to find a fellow traveler who's gone from sort of philosophy libertarian tube to BookTube.
Yeah, it's rare. It's unique. I remember chatting in the Discord with people, and the topic came up of what is your YouTube feed filled with? And everyone said, oh, it's car stuff and MMA stuff and sports commentary and of course. And I told them, proudly that me it was to politics, music. And they were shocked. They couldn't really politics under YouTube. Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. I'm interested in philosophy. I studied it in college, and I find that kind of thing very fascinating. I wouldn't completely call myself a libertarian anymore, but I still find those ideas important and fascinating. I think I'll probably always lean that way. In some sense, and I've got content about John Locke on my YouTube channel and Montesquieu, and I love the history of political thought. I like intellectual history and that sort of thing, so I don't shy away from it. And people can go back and check that stuff out on my channel if they want, and just scroll all the way down to the very beginning, and probably the first 30 videos or so are classics, so the Western canon and stuff like that, and also sort of the big ideas of political philosophy and that sort of thing. So
yeah, no, it's
cool.
I have to. I'm probably gonna cut that part out, but so is that purple or pink? I can't tell.
It's purple.
Okay.
It's purple. We got it. We got it because it kind of matches well with our IWizard theme.
Fair enough. But yeah. So you mentioned you were part of the libertarian thought. I've kind of gone on a similar journey, and it seems like you're kind of a Renaissance man. You have guitars in the background, and you like philosophy and that's cool, man.
Well, I don't know about you, Britton. Maybe you could tell me your journey too. But when I was in high school, I was kind of a dud. I really had nothing going on, and I decided one day that I wanted to be someone who did things, who wasn't just a consumer of things, but who actually did things and made things and created and had talents, had hobbies. It's kind of a Kierkegaardian thing. Kierkegaard said one of the most important things was to choose to become something, to really, really be something, not just be like a dilettante or a dabbler or a kind of amateur who dips their pinky into the water just ever so slightly and gets a little good at 100 different things. I thought it was important to kind of pick a few things, and so for me that's been music and reading and writing pretty much, and speaking. So I mean, it's kind of yeah, it's ancient Greek in a way.
I had a I don't know if I had a similar thing, but I was kind of like, I should do something, because there's like the kids in high school, like the choir kids. I was in choir for a little bit. I did theater for a while, which I'm still not sure why I didn't. It's a weird thing with me. Like, I'll like things and I'll just stop doing them because I'm like, it's too much work, That's actually why I stopped doing theater. I was like, it's just too much work.
You just have to find your thing so that it doesn't feel like work. That's kind of like been my. Well, I see you've got drums back there. How's that going?
It's going good. I haven't played them in a while, but I enjoy them a lot. I need to get back into it, but it's just when COVID hit, and my dad works at home now, so it's kind of hard to get playing in. But yeah, I got into that. I really enjoy doing it. But yeah, no, I was kind of like. I always was wanting to do things differently from other people, so I always liked I like more intellectual pursuits, I guess.
That's good. Yeah.
It's kind of
Yep.
It's kind of why.
What's that? Go ahead.
I was like, that's kind of why I dove into like libertarian philosophy for a while, because I'm like, everyone's liberal. I'm gonna do something different.
Well, that almost sounds like you're different just to be different. Is that could be its own kind of curse, wouldn't you say?
A little bit, yeah. And then I actually was like, oh yeah, this is really good. Like, I started reading like books about it.
And then you really got into it for real, authentically.
Yeah, watch videos on YouTube. Really dove in. And I found a community of people who are really interesting. Find a lot of interesting people, and and then the 2016 election happened, and I guess that just inspired everyone to become as radical as possible, because it just devolved into like they started like entertaining like Holocaust denial, and I had to step away. I'm like, no.
Yeah. Well, the group you were in, the people in your group were formerly sympathetic to your libertarian values, but then they kind of went off the rails, you would say?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, it's a moment of real extremes in the country. That's for sure. I've always tried not to be a reactionary, but to really have values that don't change just because of the moment we're in. Certainly, your political philosophy has to be flexible enough to be able to handle different situations and scenarios and things like that. But if you find yourself becoming a kind of knee-jerk reactionary, you end up sort of falling into that what do they call it? Affective polarization trap, in which what was the old joke? If Trump came out against guns and threatened to ban them, then the left would say, "No, our sacred Second Amendment, no." And so that's just not what I want to be. I want to have principles that. What is it? Well, it's funny. The Libertarian Party, their slogan is the party of principle.
I know.
So they see themselves as truly having a set of sort of axiomatic, foundational beliefs, that a kind of lens through which to see politics and political life through. And hopefully that lens is for them limited government, natural negative rights, sort of freedom from freedom to make your own choices and free market like Austrian economics, that sort of thing. So hopefully hopefully they that party doesn't waver from that because it is important to have a third party option for sure. I wouldn't say it's a robust option, but I think it's important that it's there.
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, my thing really was. I mean, if I could describe myself now, it'd probably be like a classical liberal. I'm more. There are still things, and also kind of I moved away from libertarianism because I kind of got older, and I started kind of. This sounds very pretentious. I apologize, but I got older, and I kind of thought more, and I kind of felt that there were some parts of it that were impractical, and it also kind of entertained some ideas that I wasn't a fan of, and more subtextual, not really like it's blatant, you know. And also just kind of, I kind of gradually, as extremism sort of took over, I kind of just grew disenfranchised with it.
Mm-hmm. Well, hopefully the attitudes of the people in your movement don't force you to go reactionary, like, even against them. So if libertarians become, if they begin uncomfortably flirting with bad extremist elements, and if you run in the opposite direction, again, that's kind of that trap that we talked about. Hopefully you have fixed principles and you can say, even when they go off the deep end, that you're here where you always were. Although, as you point out, I suppose I wouldn't call myself a libertarian either because given what I've read and learned since I used to call myself that probably 2 years ago is probably the last time I was still clinging on to that label. And folks at home, if you want to learn more about that, I won't get into that here, but you could read some of my Quillette articles. I wrote a bunch of Quillette articles, and you can kind of slowly see my transition away from that. But it wasn't the way the other libertarians were acting. It was just the more that I read and the more that I learned, I didn't think it was I think it's ideal, but I don't think it works in practice. I think if everyone were sort of homo rationalis, rationally self-interested, sort of like Ayn Rand, like automaton, like logic choppers who just made like perfectly rational decisions all the time, economically and personally, then I think it might work. So, but I don't actually think the people in this country could handle libertarianism because I don't think we have a moral, religious, or educated populace, as John Adams would have it. So I don't think we have a populace that's even educated about their own liberties or have any real desire to sustain them. So I don't see it. I don't see it. I think a political philosophy is only really as good as it's the caliber of its people. So yeah, I just don't see that working right now. You'd have to give the public a lot of training and that sort of thing. But
I mean, I still feel sympathy with some libertarian ideas, like
no, me too.
Like it's general, like do it's general kind of do what you want as long as you don't hurt anybody. Like I generally am like, what, that's not a bad idea to live towards. But if there's anything that I learned when I played BioShock, I don't know if you play video games, but if there's one thing I learned from playing BioShock is ideals don't always hold under human nature.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in the same place. With you there. The more that I've read, the more that I've come to realize that there are some things that the government should do. But I'm with you. I'm a big time capitalist. I'm a fan of capitalism. I shouldn't say that. I would say this.
That's not a popular
Winston
thing to
Churchill
say.
once said, Winston Churchill said about democracy, it's the worst system in the world except for all the others. I
Yeah.
think that is true about capitalism as well. As Thomas Sowell says, there's no solutions, only trade offs. I don't think any system is perfect,
No.
uh, but I think capitalism is easily the best thing that we have. It's lifted the world out of extreme poverty. It's the only it's the only economic system or political system that you can't even really call it a system. It's just hands off. It's just laissez-faire. It's just the government not intervening as you try to make voluntary, mutually beneficial, consensual transactions in the marketplace. So it's not really even a system. But I would say that it's the only thing capable of generating wealth. Socialism just redistributes wealth that's already there. So so yeah, I'm a big capitalist. I believe in uh, ordered liberty and natural rights. There's some big things I disagree with the Libertarian Party about, but but overall, I guess I would call myself a conservatarian, something like that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I wouldn't call myself a conservative because I don't really like the Republican Party all that much. But,
Well, they're not very conservative now, are they?
I guess not if you really want to talk about their politics. But,
Well, they're not the same thing, is what I mean. Like conservative. I mean, to say I'm not a conservative because I don't like the Republican Party is like, it's like saying I'm not a leftist because I don't like the Democratic Party. It's like,
oh, well, yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Yeah, no, I mean, I've met so many people who are, even in my family, who are just, and that's kind of what frustrates me about our political discussion in this country is that nobody understands what these philosophies are actually saying. Like, I
yeah,
oppose communism, but that's because I've encountered its philosophy and this is what it says, and I just don't agree with it. You know, I can say why I don't agree with it rather than just oh, communism's just what the government does, and I just shake my head. And it drives me crazy when people are like, "Oh, are you a communist?" I'm like, "No, I've actually read the fucking thing, so I want you to know."
yeah. Well, that's really important.
Know your
I
opposition.
totally agree with you.
Don't be ignorant. Ignorance
I
pisses me
totally
off.
agree with you. Absolutely.
But yeah, no, I agree with you though. I think there was something David Simon said, who created The Wire. He said, "What good is individual freedom without?" Either he said collective responsibility or like something responsibility in general. And I agree with it. Like, what good use is being free to do what you want if you can't help your fellow man? And that's my problem with stuff like objectivism, because like we do naturally want to help other people. I mean, Ayn Rand can prattle on how much she wants about people are rationally self-interested. I think people do want to help others, like I really do, as much as we are self-interested.
Yeah. I think Rand is right about a lot of things, but wrong about some very fundamental and important things. And I do think a lot of people get her wrong, very wrong. A lot of people think that she is
Yeah, she
telling
inspires a
people
lot of
just,
knee-jerk, like, oh, like,
yeah,
selfishness is good. No way.
yes,
Yeah.
a lot of hate. She inspires a lot of hate. It's kind of crazy. And the Fountainhead is one of my favorite novels. I sh- you know, so she's an important voice, I think, in the liberty movement, and people do misconstrue her to say that what she's advocating is for everyone to just be, completely, um, completely not help others, never help others, never build community, never give to charity, never do anything that is good for other people. Her argument is obviously, you would know this, but
Mm-hmm.
her argument is that it is in your self interest to help others,
Yeah, exactly.
and you should help others as long as it's in your self interest, and that the world would work a lot better if we stopped talking about altruism and we started talking about, as you said, a kind of rational selfishness. It's similar to the sort of Adam Smith point.
Mm-hmm.
Adam Smith says it is not it is not out of benevolence or kindness that the baker gets up at 4 a.m. and starts baking, and produces all this bread and pastries and stuff like that. It's not out of the goodness of his heart. It's so that he can make money and survive and send his kids to college and pay for his mortgage and stuff like that. But as a consequence, everyone gets bread, which isn't true under communism.
Sure.
A system that is predicated on the idea that we're all just selfless new Soviet man sort of widgets in the system, and that we will just eventually will become what Marx called species being, and we'll just start baking bread out of the goodness of our heart because we love our brother. That is not why people wake up at 4 a.m, is to bake bread to help their brother. They do it so that they'll get something out of it, so they can help their family and stuff. You know all this.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. It's yeah, I know it's but that kind of goes back to my issue with objectivism. I get what she means is that people are rationally self-interested, but what I don't agree with is that altruism as a concept is bad. Because, like I said, I do think people do naturally want to help other people.
I agree with you. That's why I'm not. That's a big part of why I'm not. I don't call myself an objectivist for sure. I don't think in a Randian universe. I was watching a documentary about these Christians in India who nurse the sick and the dying. And they sit there and risk catching diseases, and they nurse these elderly people and change their diapers as they sit in their filth and excrement. And that's all they do for 12 hours a day, is they sit there and they hold dying people's hands. And I don't think that exists in a Randian universe. There's a reason that when you read Ayn Rand novels, there are no children in Ayn Rand novels. A
lot of speeches, though.
And what's that?
A lot of speeches, though, is what I said.
A lot of speeches, though. That's true. And I do love her work. I think she's super important. And I think she does better than almost any other philosopher at explaining natural rights. I think her metaphysics are kind of brilliant. But I think that partially it's because she escaped from the Soviet Union. I think there's a sense in which she's a little bit reactionary, and she, in a knee-jerk fashion, goes in the exact opposite direction of the Soviet Union. But I truly value her for... I don't think I'm a very extreme person. So when I read Ayn Rand, I see her as a corrective to a lot of the bad trends that are more collectivist in orientation. So one of my favorite novels is The Fountainhead, and it's about the heroic individual in man. And I think it's such an important story. It's also about cancel culture, that book.
Sure, yeah.
It's about this. Have you read it?
Yeah, a long time ago. I mean, I was in back when I was in my libertarian / I was in high school at the time. I did read a lot of Ayn Rand's work. Didn't agree with all of it, of course, but I thought it was interesting because I have a weird interest in objectivism, even though I would say I'm very firmly not an objectivist.
Same with me.
And and I know that's something that would probably raise some eyebrows, but I've kind of just stopped caring at this point. But
me too.
But I think her view of the world is really fascinating, even if I don't think I don't think that's how human nature works, and B, she never takes into account that people could abuse her principles, or as far from what interviews I've seen, I don't think that ever occurred to her. Or if it did, she was just like, oh, people will just be rational. Like, people are not always rational, Miss Rand.
No.
That's
No,
my problem
they're
with
not.
objectivism.
And I
And
I think she go ahead. Go ahead.
and that's kind of my issue with a lot of these philosophies like communism or fascism, is that people don't act the way you think they do.
Yeah.
We are very contradictory creatures, and you're never gonna act like when you put people in a box. That's when I kind of like, that's where you lose me a bit. Communism does the same thing, so I'm not pretending Rand is the only person who does this, and even like even fascism does this.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like and a lot of people call Rand fascist. I disagree, but I can definitely see where like corruption could fester in an objectivist society if such a thing happened.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, anyone who calls her a fascist just doesn't understand anything about politics at all. Um, I mean, gosh, you could do the political compass thing. She's not up there on the top right quadrant. You know, fascist. It would be hard to even understand what a person could possibly mean by that. Um, I think maybe if I'm just being like really charitable, like really, really charitable, maybe they mean that she wants such a limited government, although she's not an anarchist at all. But she does think the government should be ordered toward and teleologically oriented toward protecting natural rights. And that when you tax citizens, it should only be for the protection of their natural rights, protection against foreign and domestic threats, protection against fraud and corruption and theft, et cetera, et cetera. But how would it be fascist? I guess some people are under the impression that if government is limited enough, it's going to look like Snow Crash, and the vast 99% will be the lower classes, and everyone will be living in pods and eating bugs and owning nothing. And and I suppose that's what a lot of people think, that people will become so desperate in a system like that, and that there'll be like three guys that own everything in America, um, which I think is a big time straw man of her. I think she totally has. There are big time issues with her philosophy. I don't agree with it entirely. I think she's a very important voice and a brilliant thinker, but I think she doesn't take into consideration the possibility that under her system we will become more atomized. I mean, you can already see this now. The crisis of loneliness and despair and drug addiction and complete atomization, the sort of just, just isolation, and the focus is on the self, not the community. And I think it's, I mean, if you look at her novels, it's like the heroes are lonely people who are having illicit affairs. They're usually not married, or if they are married, they're about to get divorced, or they have a horrible relationship, or they're cheating on their partner. They're stabbing each other in the back. They're staying up late at night. They're working 16 hours a day. They're, they're getting their release in the form of sort of sensual, heedless pleasure. Yeah, I think there are some big time shortcomings with her philosophy.
Well, sure, yeah, but I guess what kind of bugs me about the discourse with objectivism is that people don't. It's, for one, I think it's overhated, which I don't think is necessarily fair. You can have problems with it. I mean, we just discussed our issues with it now. But I find a lot of it just kind of goes back to that, and I can understand this on one level, is that kind of knee-jerk reaction, where people are like, oh, she says people should be selfish, and yeah, kind of, there's that knee-jerk where I'm kind of like, not really, yes, kind of, but not really. She's just saying, if you're going to help someone, do it because you want to do it. not necessarily
Yeah.
because Big Papa government tells you to.
Right, right. And the other thing I think people are just that people one of the reasons they hate her is because I think people are often looking for heroes. They can't allow there to be just a cadre of different voices that all contribute meaningfully to the conversation. I was reading a book. This was years ago when I was in graduate school, and I had to read it for a class. It was called "Perks of Being a Wallflower."
Oh, I love that book.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and it was a grad course called Children's Lit, or I don't know, young adult lit or children's lit. It was just so we became more familiar with the kind of stuff that you could teach at, I don't know, like the middle school level or the like high school level that also is like young adult fiction and not just. Anyways, one of the books the professor had us read was Perks of Being a Wallflower, and the teacher in that book at this high school says that the main character, the AP teacher, advises his student, who's the main character, to read The Fountainhead, and his advice to the student is read it like a filter, not a sponge, and be a filter, not a sponge when you read it. And I think people have a lot of trouble doing that. I agree with 75% of her philosophy, political and philosophical. So that means that she's a big time ally of mine, and I think she's absolutely fantastic, and I'm proud to say it publicly. And but do I disagree with a lot of her philosophy? Oh yeah. But that's okay. My goodness gracious. Like Charles Dickens is my favorite writer, and I probably only agree with, 40% of his philosophy.
I
So,
do love Dickens,
my
bro. I want to read more of his
goodness.
books, though.
He's phenomenal. He's just a real genius.
Yeah, no, I mean,
So,
I will say I have read The Fountainhead. I would say it's a better novel than Atlas Shrugged, which,
absolutely
Atlas
it is.
Shrugged, I think, is interesting conceptually, but really silly once you kind of think about it. And there's also that 70-page speech where John Galt basically outlines the objectivist philosophy, which admittedly is very painful to read. But in
It
terms
is.
of like conceptual, in terms of its like and what it's talking about, I think is interesting. Like, what if It's like what if Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, and all these other people just decide to go off into the distance? Like, what would happen? I think that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, not only what happens if they just decide to get up and leave, but uh, what are the conditions that would make it so difficult for them to exist and produce value for us, which is what it is. I'm not having money stolen from me when I buy an iPhone. The iPhone is worth more than the money I have in my pocket, so I gladly fork it over with pleasure. So value is being created for me, and given that the iPhone is cheaper to produce than the money in my pocket, they're happy to accept my money. We both benefit. So what happens when what kind of conditions have to be in place for these people to decide that it's not worth it anymore for them to create value for people and to create wealth? And also, what happens when you decide that you're just going to kneecap all of the wealth creators, and you no longer have the wealth creators turn the spigot off? You can't, the government doesn't have any money. I mean, they can print money, but that causes inflation. So it's the wealth creators that the government has to seize it from in order to redistribute it. Well, what if these people just say sayonara? What happens? And what's interesting about that book is an attempt to show how a society goes from a capitalist economy to a socialist economy to a communist economy in real time, and she actually shows it step by step. So I agree with you, Britton. It reads better like a textbook, actually. Now there are some stark scenes. There are some truly beautiful and interesting, fascinating scenes. I heard Daily Wire actually just bought up the rights to that book so they could turn it into a movie. The last time it was turned into a movie, it wasn't great. Wasn't good at all actually. But there's some great ideas in it. She was truly knowledgeable about economics and became more so over the course of her life. But
Well, she did
Britton, to
it.
your point,
She was friendly with like people like Mises or Mises.
yeah, Mises, yeah, she
Yeah,
was.
and like Murray Rothbard. So she knew those guys.
Yep,
So
yeah, absolutely. And but I think Britton, you're right. The reason that The Fountainhead is a better novel is because it's less dogmatic.
it's
It's
more
less.
like, even though I think Howard Rourke is an insufferable jerk and I would hate this guy in real life, he is relatable. He's like it feels more like a story with characters, and I could relate to him even if I hated his guts a lot of the time.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. She wrote that book before she had concretized her philosophy and before she had become so unbelievably dogmatically rigid about what she believed, such that it was literally the only thing any rational person could ever think. I mean, once she had written Atlas Shrugged, she was at the point where she was a total ideologue.
Yeah.
The Fountainhead was written when she was a lover of freedom and capitalism and liberty and individualism, but she hadn't become so hardened in her beliefs. Ideologies harden people, and they see everything through that lens, and they're incapable of writing in a nuanced fashion. All of the characters in Atlas Shrugged are mouthpieces for Ayn Rand's ideology. I mean, they'll be like talking at a cocktail party, and there'll be like three of them there who agree with her philosophy, and they'll all be spitting out her talking points. And I'm like, my God, unless there's a woman named Ayn Rand in this actual world that they're all big fans of, it makes no sense that they're speaking this way and that they're speaking like textbooks. Whereas the Fountainhead, the characters actually do feel real and they're fascinating and they're interesting. And yeah, Howard Rourke is a little too much for me, but at the same time, I feel like him on a daily basis at work, in society, at the grocery store, um, online. I feel like Howard Rourke all the time.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely could feel his, like, I could relate to him kind of pushing back against people who want to hold him down, basically. I understand that on a level.
Yeah, also the rebellion against groupthink, just the sense in which Howard Rourke, the sense in which these institutions become intellectual monocultures, the way in which a stultifying kind of groupthink comes to dominate them, and it's a kind of groupthink that makes it impossible to innovate, to put forward new ideas, and he has this brilliant new, truly original way of doing architecture. It's kind of like modernist. It's what Frank Lloyd Wright, sort of mid-century modernist.
I'm not an architecture
Uh,
guy, so I couldn't put it to words.
yeah, it's like Frank Lloyd Wright modernist architecture. He wants to build every building with integrity. He wants to The materials that he chooses to build his buildings will need to go well with the actual environment and the land. Every building needs to have a theme in the same way that a man's life needs to have a theme. All that stuff, right? It's just all that Ayn Rand stuff. But he's literally not allowed to build that way, in a way that's truer, in a way that is more rational, more logical. And that book is about cancel culture. That's like a 750 page tome on cancel culture. I mean, he gets canceled like 25 times in that book. So,
Yeah.
and one of my
He doesn't make
favorite
it
things
easy for
about that
himself.
book,
He's a bit of a.
What's that?
I said he doesn't make it easy for himself. He's kind of an insufferable genius. Like I'm not.
No, he doesn't make it easy for himself, but he also lives in a society that is incapable of recognizing his genius. You know, but yeah, he is an insufferable little jerk. The idea that you can't, that you're so high and mighty and so brilliant that you can't, like, build Tudor houses because your brilliant philosophy of architecture forbids you from building in a style that you believe is outdated. Like you refuse to build like Doric columns on the front of a building that someone's paying you to build. Like, give me a break. But one of the great things about that novel, as you know, because you read it, is the way in which she satirizes and just rips to shreds the intelligentsia of her day and the way that nothing has changed, in the way that people write articles, in the way that people speak at cocktail parties, in the way that social consensus are formed, in the way that these credentialing and licensing boards and cartels and unions operate, and just a brilliant savage takedown of that whole mindset, of that whole way of being.
Oh yeah, no, it's not a terrible book at all. I mean, it's I have problems with the book, but I can't think of it at the moment. But I do remember liking it more than Atlas Shrugged.
Yeah,
Or
Anthem's not bad too.
I mean, appreciating it as like a work of literature, I should say, because like you said, Atlas Shrugged is more like a textbook.
It is. It really is. Yep, wooden characters. Just they're like dolls with those dolls that you have when you're a kid that have a pull string.
Yeah.
And you pull the string on the back, and these platitudes just spill out of their mouths. That's what her characters are like.
I don't know.
And the bad guys are all evil, like collectivist Bernie Sanders types. It's a little much.
Yeah, no, it's a little. I mean, I don't know what her editor would have. I wonder what her editor thought of this. Saw that 70-page speech. I'd be like,
oh, I read a biography of her, and the editors wanted her to take it out, obviously, and she said no. She was like Howard Rourke. She was like, I absolutely will not take that out. And they were like, okay, we're gonna publish it anyways. Actually.
Yeah, no. You know what's funny? It's funny I think of it now. No, if Ayn Rand were a character in a story, it would probably be Howard Rourke.
It would. God bless her. I just, that's the other thing. It's like, do I agree with all of it? No. But do I have admiration for her? And do I want characters like her in the world? Absolutely I do. Oh my goodness. Defenders of liberty, firebrands, stalwarts, people who challenge the status quo, people who will go on Mike Wallace or Johnny Carson and just rip these sanctimonious talk show hosts to shreds. I love it. Yeah, she's not perfect, but none of us are.
I think my favorite interview with Ayn Rand that I saw was probably the one she did with Mike Wallace in like the 60s, maybe. Black and white.
Yeah, I seen that.
It feels more like a conversation between, and plus, Mike Wallace, but I like it's not just, I mean, if you watch the ones with, like, Phil Donahue, you could definitely tell, like, he disagreed with, and there was that more combative, which isn't bad, but, I just thought it was more interesting that Mike Wallace just kind of let her speak.
Yeah, I like when the audience gets involved, though, on the Phil Donahue show.
Oh, yeah.
And the women stand up, and Ayn Rand's just like, no, I am not a feminist. Die.
Yeah, there's also that lady who's like, I'm not a fan anymore, and she's like, no. She basically's like having none of it. I'm like, oh man, come on.
Yeah, she was a piece of work.
Yeah, no.
And a brilliant piece of work.
Yeah, I was about to say a lot of people who are like brilliant, you could say, are often, I've heard, can be very difficult.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Like Mozart,
yeah.
Oh, who else could I think of? Well, I mean, I don't know if I'd call Elon Musk brilliant, but he's kind of weird.
Oh, he's absolutely brilliant. I mean, he's probably autistic too, but he's like,
Oh no,
oh
he
my
is
God.
actually. I think he confirmed that.
I mean, I think just tautologically almost, like a priori, let's say, I don't think you can be the richest man in the entire world in 2023 without being brilliant. And just that's just to say nothing about just the sheer mental synthesis and exertion that is required to build the companies that he's built to get that guy gets shit done. I know he's controversial. Some people love him, some people hate him, but um, and you can I'm sure there's a lot to criticize, and there are places where he's underrated and underappreciated, and places where he's overappreciated, and it's actually the work of other people that is to be celebrated. But the sheer amount that he's done, the I think the mountains that he's moved, so to speak. Well, let's just say his reputation speaks for itself, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I can imagine being that much of a titan of just mental activity.
yeah, no, yeah. I mean, like, oh man, there's probably other people I could think of. I can't, like Beethoven, maybe. I don't know. Beethoven was kind of a dick, wasn't he? If I remember, I read somewhere he could be really difficult.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
Stanley Kubrick, if you like movies,
Yes.
he definitely was not the nicest person.
No.
uh,
No. He wasn't, but I kind of agree with Nietzsche here. This is going to sound terrible, but I think genius does make its own rules.
yeah,
That doesn't mean they get to violate our rights, but I think genius does make its own rules. Napoleon, for example.
mm, yeah. No, I mean, though Napoleon kind of undid himself though, because
Hmm.
or at least I think so.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, there's again other people I could probably think of. I mean, I like Philip K. Dick a lot. I think he's another one who's underappreciated in terms of speculative fiction. Even though he's become more liked now, because there's movies made from his work, and they've republished a lot of his stuff.
That's good for us, right?
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I mean, if you read stuff like "Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep" or "Scanner Darkly," it's really good stuff. Or I think.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's not perfect.
100%.
There's part of it where you can definitely tell that like there's something off with this man. There's something off with this man.
Oh God, yeah.
I don't know what it was, but there's something clearly off with that man.
Mental illness.
Yes. What type of mental illness, I am not sure, but he was definitely.
I forget. My wife was telling me what it was. I forget now.
Well, I saw your "Do Androids Dream" on your name on Discord, so I thought you would understand.
Yeah, I'm a few chapters in. I'm not very far in. It's kind of crazy the way I operate. I am a total mood reader.
I'm the same
So yeah, I probably got about a fourth of the way through that book because I had a cyberpunk chat with Christopher Rocchio and Liam from Liam's Lyceum. It was
Yeah, I saw a bit of
I don't
that.
know, like 3 weeks ago, and I was just like thinking to myself, like, what haven't I read? And so I kind of scrambled to like read as much of that as I could before the conversation, and I haven't picked it up since because again, I'm just such a mood reader. I'll blast through several books that I just deeply want to read, but if it ever feels like a chore, I tend to not finish the books. So I was not in the mood to read "Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep," but so that's probably why I didn't finish it. But I wanted to like at least get some experience with it before I chatted with those guys.
Oh, that's interesting. I remember when I read it in high school. I got through it pretty quickly. It's not.
It's a short book, man. I just need to sit down and bang it out.
Yeah, no, I saw a little bit of your cyberpunk video. What's funny about I like some cyberpunk, like I like the System Shock games. I enjoy Transmetropolitan a lot. That's a comic, but I don't know. I've just never really been interested in the subgenre. It's just kind of like there's some books I'd like to read. Like I'd like to read like Snow Crash at some point, or William Gibson's I forget Neuromancer, I think.
Yeah. Snow Crash is both a terrible novel and a great novel. It's one of the rare examples I can think of where that is true. Like and a lot of his books are that way, but like the first 150 pages are one of the most brilliant 150 pages of science fiction I've ever read. And then the book turns into an absolute godforsaken rambling mess. It is just written atrociously for the rest of the book. And yet, for every 45 pages of just absolute out of control tangent dreck, just inability to have a kind of controlled authorial voice or know where to put the lens of the camera kind of thing. After that 45 pages, there'll be 15 pages of just absolute brilliance, and I'm talking about the passages where he goes into like linguistics and like that whole discussion of linguistic universalism versus relativism and memes and philosophy and all that stuff. So it's a brilliant mess. It's an absolute mess of a novel, but it's still worth reading.
Yeah, I've heard similar things that it's not your grandpa's science fiction novel.
Certainly not a clean novel. Where were his editors? I have no idea. But again, it's one of those things like, would I have published it if he forced me to like keep it the way that it was? Yeah, I mean, look how well it's done. I mean, it's just there's so much good stuff in there, but it's just it's kind of like Atlas Shrugged in that way. Except it's not as preachy. It's a flawed mess of a novel that is important for a bunch of other reasons besides it being a graceful, eloquent novel.
Fair enough. I guess. No, but the thing you mentioned earlier that like there's a part of you that kind of has a hard time buying into like the societal idea of cyberpunk, that there would like be these big mega corporations that would take over the world. I have a similar kind of thing where I have a hard time really thinking that's how it would work. Not saying it couldn't happen. I mean, there's there's like the damn, what's that? It's the villain from Pirates of the Caribbean, the West Indies Company. I think is what it was called. I could be wrong. But I know that those exist. I just don't.
Oh yeah, Amazon is already there.
Oh yeah, that's. But I don't know if they would have like armies of like people walking around shooting people, or beating up people.
Well, the government won't let them. But I mean, imagine that it's Snow Crash and you have a company like that. I kind of can buy it. I mean, the problem is, like, you and I know this, I guess, better than anyone because of the kind of political philosophy we've studied. But there are also some problems with that.
Sure, yeah, exactly. That's kind of, and a lot of the time when like stuff like a mega corporation happens, it's because a government lets it happen, or at least you see them like Nazi Germany. Oh man, Nazi Germany.
Well, it's cronyism. If you take a company like Amazon, Amazon literally What's that?
You even see it in America. Government and businesses working together.
Yeah, cronyism, like 100%. Amazon lobbies the federal government to regulate it in such a way that with its vast bureaucratic finesse and teams of high-powered, expensive corporate lawyers, they can deal with the red tape and the regulation, whereas any kind of challenger cannot. They don't have the resources. It's kind of like the cable companies. So yeah, there's a ton of cronyism. Like Amazon literally begs the government to regulate it in such a way so as to cripple its competitors. It can jump through the hoops with no problem. Anything the government wants to throw at it, it can jump through those hoops. I mean, unless we go full Atlas Shrugged, you know, and we get like a dog eat dog bill or whatever. But like, you know, you already see how the way in which that company has grown is not just because the other thing is partially it's cronyism, but Amazon is also just unbelievably freaking good. I mean, they are so efficient. They are so proactive and just deadly, deadly efficient. I mean, you go to barnesandnoble.com and you say, you know what? I'm sick of Amazon controlling 80% of the national book market. It's bad for the country. I'm going to go shop at Barnes & Noble. And you go to their website and it doesn't work. Coupons don't work. Then you order a book. It says it's going to come in 3 days. It comes in 7 days. You go to Amazon. You press 2 buttons. And the book is there sometimes the same day.
No,
it's unbelievable.
It's a double-edged
and they
sword
literally
of capitalism sometimes, you know.
They literally I live in a big condo complex, right? It's like one of those old mill buildings with these converted like, you know, loft condos. And we have this big room downstairs and packages get stolen there sometimes. Amazon builds a thing called Amazon Hub. It is a gigantic storage locker, and they place their packages. They do such good business that they install a hub in my condo complex, and they lock the packages in that hub. And you know, now they have their own FedEx essentially, and they're just so damned good. Everything works always the way that it's supposed to work. It's cheaper, it's more efficient, and so partially they're successful because we've made them successful.
Well, yeah.
It's like
it's again, like I said, it's not that I don't think like a cyberpunk society could happen. It's just kind of like, I don't know. Well, like, would there be like big armies of like companies running around shooting people? I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, no. And the other thing is like, you forget that companies like Amazon is a global marketplace. They help companies make more money. So small businesses use Amazon, right? And furniture makers use Amazon. If you shut down Amazon tomorrow, you would hurt all these small businesses, would be the angriest people of all, because that's partially how they make their money. I guess what I am concerned about is that Amazon controls 80% of the book market in this country. And what that means is now that Amazon is banning certain books, meaning by ban, I mean they are refusing to sell or carry certain books that are that they have deemed to be inappropriate or over the line or like taboo. And so they've got a list of, it's a small list, but they have a list of books that they have refused to carry. And that's created a chilling effect, because if publishers now believe that what you're writing about is too controversial such that Amazon won't actually sell it, they ain't publishing it. And they're not going to publish it because that book's not going to get sold if Amazon doesn't refuses to sell it. And so it's creating a chilling effect such that, you know, what Amazon decides or dictates, that filters down to the publishers, who have to kind of check with Amazon first now before they. I mean, this happened with a very controversial book called When Harry Became Sally by Ryan T. Anderson. It's just a book about gender from a conservative perspective. But what happened is Amazon refused to carry it. And so the only way you could actually buy it was straight through the publisher. The publisher came out and said, "Oh shoot, we're gonna sell it like out of our garage, and we're just gonna like not out of their garage, but out of our warehouse. We'll sell it direct to consumer." And it created what they call the Streisand effect. So Anderson was lucky You know what the Streisand effect is?
Yeah, it's a South Park. You know, it's like if you say don't do this, then that makes people want to do it.
Yeah, so the book sold like just, like unbelievably well, because Amazon is saying don't read this book. But and I bought a copy like just to like flip the bird to Amazon for censoring books. Just like, let us be adults. Don't do this. You're going down a bad road, Amazon. So I bought the book. It came like 4 months later. So it's actually kind of dangerous, Amazon having this much power. And that kind of circles back to why I'm not 100% a libertarian anymore. It's stuff like that.
Yeah, no, it's definitely my kind of that's also my kind of why I stepped away from being a libertarian and being more like classical liberal, because like, classical liberal's more respectable, I think. But yeah, no,
It just sounds nicer to people at cocktail parties, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, I find a lot of the problem is that libertarians either don't want to or just ignore the issues that can come from capitalism, such as like big monopolies and cronyism and all this stuff. And
yeah, someone like Rand would say cronyism is not really capitalism's fault. It's actually the government who's supposed to be regulating the company, instead engaging in corruption with them. But I totally get your point, and I think you're not wrong at all.
yeah, I know. It's like I said, that's kind of the shortcoming of capitalism. Is in these big companies, kind of, they are capitalists because they're providing a service, but also it just kind of depletes competition. Now one might say that's like the natural order of things, and maybe it is, but that can lead to a lot of problems. When you have one person saying, "This is this is what you're reading," all this.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, seriously. Like and I believe in this on like both sides of the spectrum. Like, there are controversial topics that like, people on the left believe in. Imagine, just pick any scenario. Imagine there's some scholar on the left who criticizes like Israel's policies. Now, I'm actually Jewish, and I probably wouldn't be in love with a book like that. But I think if it's critical of the state of Israel and Amazon refuses to sell it, that ain't getting published. I'm telling you, man. So
yeah, I know.
Yeah, it's something I really.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but it's kind of the
No, go ahead.
It's kind of the problem with a monopoly or cronyism, at least at its where it takes away the choice.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah,
why I can see
absolutely.
the argument that it's not true capitalism, because like true capitalism, as they call it, is choice. It's about choice.
I've heard all those, perspectives, and someone like Mises or Ayn Rand or Rothbard, they didn't think there was such a thing as a true monopoly. Like in some sense, they're going to claim, look, if you want to talk about cronyism and that's how the business got where it's at, that's government. Get the government to stop engaging in cronyism, right? It's like, people complain about the fact that like Amazon pays $0 in federal taxes, but it's like the government literally created a tax code that enables them to put money into R&D and charity and all these other things that enable them to literally pay $0 in taxes. And they're not even loopholes. It's just in the tax code that there are certain hoops they can jump through to put their money where they want to put it versus giving it to the government so that the government can decide how to spend it. It's literally in the tax code. There's no actual loopholes. Like Amazon can just do a set of things, and their tax lawyers know how to work the system legally, and they end up paying $0 in federal taxes. Now, everyone who makes a salary there pays taxes, and they pay local tax, state taxes. But so again, someone like Ayn Rand would say, isn't that the government's fault? Isn't that the government's fault that they have a tax code that enables them to pay nothing in taxes? Isn't it the government's fault when they themselves get in bed with Amazon? And then if we're worried about a monopoly being created, like where it just happens without it, well, it's like That's just a consequence of you and me deciding that Amazon's such a great, efficient company that provides us so much value that we want to give them all our money versus some small business.
Yeah, I know. It's that's the thing. It's kind of the double-edged sword of. I mean, yeah, well, I'll say capitalism because on the one hand, it kind of creates these problems where these companies kind of take over. At the same time, you are still using their services because the service is good.
But you're right. To your point, there are some situations in which you become desperate, and as you point out, you're not making a choice. And so right now I shop at Amazon because they're so damned good and they create value, they provide value for my life, and they're cheaper and more efficient than the alternative, like always. So I shop there. But there could come a time when Amazon's the only game in town and we have no choice but to shop there. And then they start raising their prices and changing. Now, if you don't have a broad middle class that's making a good income, they can't afford to buy from Amazon. So, how does taking over the world really benefit a company that needs to make a profit? But anyways, it's interesting to talk about.
Yeah, no, but kind of
the snow crash vision of things.
But kind of going back to cyberpunk, I guess it's kind of funny because now I'm like, you know what? Maybe it's not as unfeasible as I once thought it was.
Oh, maybe not.
But I'm
not.
I'm not a fan of the genre as much. Also, I just find the idea of people and technology, transhumanism in general. I just find that idea kind of creepy.
Me too.
It just kind of it almost feels like it takes the person out of
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Like, I want to read stories about humans. And there is a certain point at which the line is blurred so much. And I know this is a big theme for Christopher Rocchio in his actual books. It's that ship of Theseus question. At what point is the ship of Theseus no longer the ship of Theseus? At what point does the collection of particles of sand become a pile of sand? So at what point do you augment the human being enough so that they're no longer what we would recognize as a human being? And at that point, do I even care about following them as a main character,
But that's funny. I'm fascinated by like AI. That's one of my like favorite like concepts in science fiction, And like I'm working on something because I'm really fascinated. Like, could a robot become a human being? Like, could it replicate what it's like to be a person?
Yeah, well, that's as you know. Wait, where did you go? There you go.
While at the same time, I'm kind of like, transhumanism, kind of stinky.
Yeah. I like your point. That is, what's the movie? AI, Artificial Intelligence, that Spielberg flick with Haley Joel Osment. I mean, it's Pinocchio, obviously. Mm-hmm. That's the story. He wants to become a real boy, and that's how the film ends, right? Is he's in front of the blue fairy, like underneath the rising sea levels of New York City. He's like underneath. He's like underneath the water, and he's like praying to the blue fairy to make him a real boy, and he's down there for like 100,000 years or whatever. That's exactly what you were talking about.
Yeah, Blade Runner plays with that idea.
Yep. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Do androids dream of electric sheep in a lesser? Though Philip K. Dick was more not a fan of the idea of AI because it's like, because if you read the book, like the androids in them are just dicks, and he was very clear where he's like, they wouldn't be human, they would just be a machine carrying out a function, which makes sense, but at the same time, I'm like, what would it take for them to be a human being? Especially like now, how AI has become so advanced, like it's crazy.
What's that?
Oh, I said I have Snapchat. I don't use it very often, but it had this AI text thing, and I used it. And it was really fascinating.
So fascinating. And what I like about it is that I'm kind of a big, philosophy buff. I really love like philosophy of mind and epistemology and metaphysics. And so it's kind of at this point, it's like a 100-year-old question. Um, where does consciousness come from? What does it mean to be a human? What sorts of things do you have to be a human? Can a computer ever become conscious? Um, is I tend to be kind of a property dualist, so I think when atoms come together in the right way, you get an emergent, complex phenomenon that you can call consciousness. Um, Consciousness, in other words, supervenes on matter. So conscious states supervene on brain states. Um, but I don't think I I just find the question extremely fascinating, and that's where I like Britain science fiction that wades into philosophy land. That is
Yeah,
my
me too.
favorite kind of science fiction.
Me too.
Yeah,
Yeah. Have you ever read like Heinlein? Because uh,
Vineland.
no, Heinlein, Robert Heinlein.
Oh, Heinlein. Oh, yeah, I have absolutely.
I was about to say, I mean, like, if you're like interested in libertarian thought, I mean,
Yeah, I've read Heinlein. Yeah,
the moon is a harsh mistress is still
I taught that.
is still probably my favorite of his books, but very interesting man, Heinlein was.
Yeah, yeah, he was definitely like a libertarian. He was like he almost considered himself like an anarcho-capitalist. You know, he was totally fascinated with the idea of liberty and its potential to unlock human greatness and all that.
It's
Yeah,
funny.
Moon is a Harsh Mistress. Great book.
I mean, I was briefly an anarcho-capitalist, but then I realized that like the same kind of pitfall is that it would just become another government after a while. You can't get over that, like you know,
Yeah, 100%.
like you can't
I agree
argue
with you.
around that, or if you could,
I
it's very
totally
hard.
agree with you.
I haven't heard a convincing argument yet about why that wouldn't be the case.
I agree. I'm kind of with Curtis Yarvin on this when he says that basically, like, corporations, if you look at them, are kind of indistinguishable from monarchies. They're run like monarchies, and yeah, we everything keeps coming back to the snow crash. Um, Under anarcho-capitalism, would you have essentially tribal zones? In Snow Crash, you have burb claves, right? These like neighborhoods where government is so small that there are no longer libraries. There is no longer an IRS that collects any taxes, which means they can't collect taxes to protect your rights. Now we've made do without an IRS. I think we've only had one. I don't think we started collecting income tax in like what 1919 or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's like government becomes so small that the government fails to carry out what is probably its only legitimate function from a libertarian or like Lockean perspective, which is protecting people's natural rights. It can't even do that. So, people are like carrying around samurai swords and like nuclear bombs and like Enzo's and corporations are run by the mob, and there's like giant pizza corporations that are allowed to shoot their delivery drivers if they can't deliver a pizza in under 30 minutes. And so these like cars have like rocket boosters on them and like weapons, and there are people trying to like sabotage like the pizza driver, and like if they fail to make it in 30 minutes or less, like they execute the pizza delivery boy on live television for people's entertainment, and people live in like you store it containers, and basically live in the pod and eat the bug and wear their VR headset, and because they're so poor and miserable, they like can't even afford like a decent, like dignified life in the real world, which Stevenson calls meat space. So they have
So
to
it's
buy
kind of like
property in
Ready Player
virtual
One.
reality. What's that?
Oh, it's kind of like Ready Player One in that way, which I don't think is very good science fiction, but that just kind of that popped to my mind.
I've never read it. I think I watched the movie late at night one night, but I've never read that.
If you listen to audiobooks, the audiobook makes it more fun, but I don't like it. I think it's a very
People seem to love that book. What do you think about it?
it's fun, but it's a very shallow exploration of why people feel the need to escape into other realities is what I think is the problem with that book. Yeah, that's really about it. It's just kind of like it's just nostalgia fest, which isn't bad, but I mean, if you don't have something, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Substantive. I'm not going to be interested in it. I mean, I read a book called The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay earlier this year, which dealt with a similar idea, and which I thought was a brilliant novel.
Who's the author?
Michael Chabon. I don't know how it's pronounced.
Oh, Chabon. Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce it either. Is it Chabon or Chabon or Michael Chabon? I don't know.
It's a fantastic book, I thought, but it's basically like, but yeah, I mean, I like science fiction that explores where we go as a society, where we're going to be. Which is kind of what frustrates me about a lot of science fiction. It's more about like, look at all this cool technology we'll have in the future. And I'm like, that's cool, but that doesn't grab me.
Yeah, where will we be? What will our societies look like? What machine shells will contain our souls? Will
it's
will
like getting
we
a car that doesn't work? You know, you're like this really nice car, and you get in it, and you're about to start it, and there's no battery in the damn thing. You know, like
Yeah. Yeah, I like it. It's sci-fi that asks those big questions. Those big questions about why we're here, where we're going, and where we'll find meaning. It's kind of like that Cormac McCarthy. If it doesn't concern life or death, it's not interesting. Matters of life and death. So I think I tend, Britton, to like dark fiction.
Yeah.
Not because I'm nihilistic, but because I actually like going there.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. I like darker stuff. You know, it's not always I agree with that. I don't like cynicism, but I think it's interesting to go from a darker perspective because the world can be a very dark place.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, no, I mean, but yeah, no, that's kind of science fiction I enjoy. I don't know if it necessarily has to be dark. I mean, I like Star Trek. I wouldn't call Star Trek dark.
Yeah.
But it has that thing that I like, which is where are we going to be? What are we going to do in the future? How would we react if we met other societies of aliens?
Yeah, and like I want stories to be constantly dealing with the same human problems and struggles and existential questions that we've always dealt with. So I do not want science fiction. Now, there are some exceptions. When you're such a genius that you reach the level of Alistair Reynolds.
Oh, okay. I haven't read him.
And when you hit that level, sometimes the characters in Alistair Reynolds don't feel human. But that's because he is doing something so brilliant with science fiction. He may be one of the few science fiction authors who is truly trying to extrapolate out how will humans be, how will they augment themselves, what will their civilizations look like, how will their minds process things differently, but at the end of the day it still comes back to, the main character of Revelation Space cannot stop talking to the beta level simulation of his father. And many of his main characters are like detectives, and they're trying to, solve these crimes, and God knows why they're on such a mission and they're so driven and stuff like that. So, yeah, he's great.
I haven't read any of his books. I would probably say my favorite current science fiction writer would be Jeff Vandermeer.
Oh wow,
his Southern Reach books are excellent. I love Born. Yeah, he's got some good stuff. He really has that science fiction that scratches my itch, if you will.
Wow, I'll have to check him out because I did like. There was I think that first book, wasn't it turned into a movie?
Annihilation was, yes. Though the book is
and it was awesome.
So, you won't have to be like, oh, so, because that's a problem I run into when I watch the adaptation first, is when I read the book, I'm like, oh, I know what happens. This is, oh.
Yeah. I have one of his books, but it's not one of those. It's a book. It's kind of a silly book, but it's fun. It's I think it's called The Fantasy Book. And it's like sketches and artwork, and it's all about writing fantasy, writing speculative fiction, and creating fantasy worlds. I forget what it's called. I think I have it in the other room, but I think he wrote it with his wife or something.
Oh, yeah. I haven't read any of this, anthologies he's done with his wife, but I've heard of them.
No, it's like an art book. It's like filled with...
Is it like the Wonder Book? I think I've
That's
heard of
it.
This.
That's it. Right there. That's it. It's the Wonder Book.
Yeah, no, I haven't read that one, but I might have to check that out because I do enjoy a lot of his work. I did like Andy Weir's The Martian. I thought that was pretty good.
Never read it, man. You're like leaps and bounds ahead of me apparently in sci-fi. I have not read The Martian.
It's pretty good. Yeah, it definitely has that kind of Heinlein, Clarke, Asimov kind of feel, but it's more modern and the characterization's a lot better.
The competent man.
Yeah, no.
Trope.
You're not a fan?
Oh, no, I like it. I love the competent man trope. It just sounds like that's what it is. Heinlein's kind of the competent man, the capable.
It's not as idealized, where it's like,
it
doesn't feel quite as like, oh man, this guy is so competent. You should admire him. It's more like, oh man, this guy should we hope he gets out of there alive.
Yeah.
I had a friend who didn't like it. I was like, what? But whatever. Not a tastes are gonna align. Another video I watched yours. I watched a bit of it, but I didn't watch all of it. It was your art was not subjective video. Which is funny. I had Raph Blue text on here about a couple months back, and I remember he made a video disagreeing with yours. Did you ever watch that?
No.
No? Oh, okay.
No.
Just kind of like,
oh.
No.
Well, I should watch it now. I didn't know that.
Oh, you didn't know? Oh, yeah. You haven't been. Oh, yeah. I think. Oh, wow. That was the last video you made. Art is not subjective. I see.
Which one is he disagreeing with?
It was the art is not subjective video. He was like.
I wonder if he was the stalker.
Oh, no. Someone was stalking you?
Well, there was a guy who would see. I don't know anything about this Raph person. I just know that he posts videos on the same Discord servers that I post videos on.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
And he's had some crossover with people that I've talked to, that I've done streams with. But I've never spoken to him or anything like that. Well, and if he made a video disagreeing with one of my videos, then that's absolutely awesome, because that's the whole point of this whole thing, is creating this like culture of intellectual discourse and all of that. So I'm like happy to see that it got some attention. But no, like the hard thing about that is, yeah, I had one guy in the comment section of my video, and he left like, you know, like 10 comments, maybe 12.
Oh,
Just one after the other. And I'm one of those people that no matter what you say in my comment section, as long as you're not being insulting, I will always keep your comment up if it's just criticism or disagreement. As long as you're not F you, you know, you mother effer, you know, you're an absolute effing moron, you big loser, all that stuff. I don't want that toxic filth in my comment section, and it's my channel, so I'll block you. So this guy eventually sunk to that level and was really going after me ad hominem, starting to really like insult me. So I blocked him, and then he started creating fake accounts and leaving comments like daily. I had to just keep blocking his new accounts because he was being so awful.
I don't think that's
it's amazing. I never expected that video to like, people got just utterly incensed about it, and were calling me like a fascist for saying that art is not completely subjective.
Throw out, you know.
Oh, they really do. Actually, a guy, no one said that in the comment section, but a guy Facebook messaged me and said that my views in that video lead to authoritarianism. And the video is literally about the fact that our judgment about art supervenes on the formal elements of the art itself. I don't understand how that's authoritarian. And I can't even believe that. I'm surprised this Raf guy didn't just like email me and let me know he made a video. I would have watched it, but
maybe I don't know. Maybe you just thought you would have seen it or something. I don't know, but
no.
I was about to say that doesn't sound. Raf's a pretty chill guy, so I don't think he would do something.
No. It must not have been him then. It was some like really crazy, angry person.
No, but I mean, I watched a little bit of it, and I thought it was interesting because I'm like, you know, it's funny because people tend to say. Well, I mean, I'm sure you didn't have a surprised face when people disagreed and were like, well, isn't it based on our, like, experiences? You know, like, would somebody from, I don't know, like, would somebody from, like, Iraq appreciate Shakespeare? Like, I don't know. Maybe they would. But,
yeah, they have historically, but,
yeah. I don't know. I'm just, you know, or would we appreciate
like,
Arabian Nights, you know?
Chinua Achebe wrote Things Fall Apart, and he structured it like a Shakespearean tragedy. But yeah, I would say too that, you know, the claims that I'm making in that video they should just be deeply uncontroversial. One of the main claims I'm making in that video is that if art is completely subjective, it would make no sense to debate over what good art is. When you leave the theater after watching Star Wars and you say you thought the film was not a good film, and I say I thought the film was a good film, if the matter were entirely subjective, there would be zero point in talking about it or debating about it. It would be the equivalent of my favorite color is green. No, my favorite color is red.
But
no, my favorite color is green.
But like, could you say why your favorite color is green though? That's
sure, and you could tell me why your favorite color is green, and there'd be no point in arguing about it because there'd be no winner.
I mean,
in my case, I can't really explain why my favorite color is green. It's just maybe it's because my eyes are green. Maybe it's because I like the forest. Maybe it's because green shirts look good when I wear them, whereas other colors don't look as good. It's just totally subjectively my favorite color. It's just a taste preference. It's just and it's not a zero sum. It's not a zero sum game. My favorite color can be green, and your favorite color can be red, and there's actually no conflict there. But Star Wars can't both be a good and a bad film.
Well, no, I mean, yeah, it's definitely. I see where you're coming from, but I mean, sorry, were you saying? Because again, I didn't watch all of it. I apologize. I was going to, but my attention span is not what it used to be. But
oh, that's fine.
But it's just kind of like, so if somebody could somebody have reasonable criticisms with something like Star Wars and get away with it, or is it more like a, or is that what you were saying, or is it more like a, you know? Because when you say art is not subjective, you're gonna have to ask, you're gonna have people going, okay, why? which I'm sure, which I know you explained in the video.
Yeah, that's what the video is. Yeah, I mean, it's a provocatively titled video. It's what I mean to say, and you can't put this as one of the things you have to do as a content creator is to make things simple and appealing for people, so they'll click on the video. But if I were being completely honest, which I was when I made the video, the title, the thumbnail would say, artistic quality is not entirely subjective, is what it should have said. But that's not as sexy as art is not subjective.
Yeah, that's kind of the drawback of being like a creator. Like, you want to be true to yourself and not like do those like clickbaity stuff, but then at the same time you're like, well, I do want people to watch them, you know.
Yeah, it's a line. You have to make sure that you walk that line carefully. But you know the thumbnail is the only thing that's really not true to me. The whole video, I still stand by it. I haven't heard a good argument yet debunking it. Your question was, are people allowed to have criticisms of things that the majority of people deem to be great? Yeah, of course. Who would stop you?
But would that make it valid, or is that just a different perspective, or would that make it kind of like what, in your opinion, makes something art? I guess is what I'm trying to ask here.
What makes it art? I suppose you could call anything art. What makes it good art? What makes, for example, a restaurant a good restaurant? These are all aesthetic questions. When you eat food, you're sensing that food with your taste, your faculty of taste. You're using your palate. What makes a good restaurant a good restaurant? The only claim that I'm making is that our judgments about whether or not a restaurant is a good restaurant or not, those judgments supervene on the actual features and facts and formal elements of the restaurant, the level of the service. How prompt is the service? How friendly is the service? How attentive is the service to your needs? How well staffed is the restaurant? Are the servers competent and experienced and knowledgeable? Do they understand the food that they're serving? Do they understand their customers? The freshness of the food. Is the food fresh? Are the ingredients mixed together in ways that are pleasing to palates such as ours? The taste faculties of creatures, phylogenetic creatures who have the type of natures that we do. So is the food fresh? Are the ingredients put together in such a way that is inspired and masterful? Is the menu is the menu inspired? Is the food cooked well? Are spices and sauces used in a way that is complementary and pleasing to creatures with natures such as ours? Is the atmosphere comfortable? Is, like, we could go on and on and on and on. How is the silverware clean? We could just go down the list. And of course, if I were a food taster, I'd be able to get really, really specific about about the way in which the food is cooked, et cetera, et cetera. I have the palate of an 8-year-old. So I like milk chocolate and ketchup and Kraft mac and cheese. I'm like not the person to ask, but the fact that I'm not the person to ask doesn't mean there isn't such a thing as good or bad food or good or bad service.
Well, sure, yeah.
So my claim should just be entirely uncontroversial. I mean, people go and leave long, ranty, extremely judgmental Yelp reviews. You'll find that there's an aesthetic relativist, someone who believes that taste is entirely subjective and the quality of food or restaurants is entirely subjective. And then they'll turn around, have a bad experience at a restaurant where the food was undercooked, or, the pizza, didn't have enough sauce on it, and, the cheese was hard and all this stuff. And they'll leave a long, angry review on Yelp that demonstrates that they're hypocritical about their beliefs about the subjectivity of taste.
Well, sure. I guess just for like an example, like in terms of like art, since we were talking about art, like what makes someone like Shakespeare or Charles Dickens? You said you really like Charles Dickens. What makes them good on like I don't want to say an objective thing because I don't really feel like getting into the nitpicky parts of that. What makes them good and what makes somebody like, I don't know. I'm not a fan of James Patterson, so I'll just throw James Patterson in there. Like, what makes him bad?
Okay, well, I like to use reductio ad absurdum and just make things really stark and clear. So if I wrote a novel that was just the letter A over and over and over again, are you telling me that book, that it is impossible to say which book is better? The book where I just write A for 600 pages or J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings?
No, there's some weird people out there who might actually take
Listen,
novels seriously.
Well, the fact that they believe that doesn't make them right. So that's my opinion on. Okay. So that's I guess, if you want my philosophy of aesthetics in a nutshell, it is simply that. That is all I am saying. I am saying that it is not entirely arbitrary, that artistic quality is not completely arbitrary. It is not completely subjective and morally relative. I think that we can use our reason and our faculties of taste and judgment to establish criteria by which we evaluate works of literature. And if I can get you to agree that J.R.R. Tolkien's work is better than a novel that just says the letter A over and over and over again for 600 pages, not just that you like it better, but that it is a better book. Imagine that you, Britton, are on a panel with me, and we have to decide which film is a better film. So which film wins the Academy Award, which film wins the Better Novel Award, the Best Novel of the Year Award. And there's a submission in front of us, and it's the letter A typed over and over and over again. And it's not just about whether you like it. My theory is that even if I subjectively prefer the novel that says A over again because I'm some sick weirdo, right? I think the example in my video that I give is maybe I'm some weirdo who likes the taste of stale bread. That doesn't make stale bread better bread than fresh bread.
Well, yeah, of course.
And it's not just a matter of subjective taste. It is an anthropocentric truth. And these are truths that are true because of the kinds of creatures we are.
I see.
What's that?
So you're talking more about like how it's made.
Of course. How else could you, what other criteria would you use to judge a book other than how it's written, or a sculpture, how it's sculpted, food, how it's made? So, you asked me why I think Shakespeare, say, is better than someone who types the letter A over and over again for 600 pages, or even like, the fiction of James Patterson, which I'm sure is like really entertaining from like a beach read perspective. Keep in mind too that we can establish criteria that divides genres and styles of literature up in a rational way. We can say, what are the best airport books? What are the best beach reads? What are the best low commitment, low attention span requiring sort of sort of just guilty pleasure fun reading. What are the best guilty pleasure reads of the year? And if you want to put, if you want to put the newest John Grisham novel on that list, I'm with you. I love reading John Grisham. But as a critic, no, like the literature of John Grisham is, if I have to compare them together, which I wouldn't naturally want to do this. But yeah, I would say that Shakespeare is a better writer than James Patterson or John Grisham. But I wouldn't even want to compare them against each other, because I don't think John Grisham is trying to do what James Patterson is trying to do. I think that these guys are doing something entirely different. As A.P. Canavan has put it, like, sometimes you just want a cheeseburger. And McDonald's is not trying to be, Chez Pierre French restaurant. And to judge Chez Pierre French restaurant. So for me, it's a teleological question. What is the telos of this McDonald's burger? And it's supposed to be one of its teloi is to be cheap. It is to be extra salty and taste really good. It should be something that's easy to eat while you drive. It should be super cheap to make, fast, quick. It should be prepared quickly. It shouldn't make me sick. It's like, anyways, my point is, my claim is not controversial at all. It is simply this, that however we judge, the judgments that we make about art, whether it's Shakespeare, whether it's John Grisham, whether it's McDonald's or Chez Pierre, whether it's The Godfather 2 or that film with J-Lo and Ben Affleck, Geely, which is considered to be one of the worst movies of all time, or Howard the Duck, when we judge these things, our judgments are not entirely subjective. We don't just, arbitrarily and randomly come up with these judgments in our head, and it's just, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Our judgments naturally supervene upon the elements that make up those things. So you can imagine, like, a painting. You'll look at the brushstrokes. You'll look at the way that light is portrayed. A pointillist painting, you'll look at the dots. And it's not controversial at all. My only claim is that if I died tomorrow, Shakespeare would still be a great writer. His greatness doesn't depend on my subjective apprehension of his. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like the Euthyphro dilemma. What I'm saying is, the Euthyphro dilemma is that thing where Plato basically says, he asks Socrates in Plato's The Euthyphro, he asks the question, are things right or wrong because God says that things are right or wrong? Meaning, if God says rape and murder are right, does that make them right? Or when God says something is right or wrong, is there an objective world in which there are actually things that are right or wrong, and that's why God says they're right or wrong? So are things right or wrong because God declares them to be so, or does God declare them to be so because they actually are outside of him? That's the Euthyphro dilemma. That's the question. And the reason it's a dilemma is because there's problems with both views. Mm-hmm. If things are right or wrong because God says they are, then God could declare anything to be right or wrong, and they just, like rape or murder. And then rape and murder would be okay, because if God says it, then they are. So we could have a world in which that was the case.
Well,
but if things are actually right or wrong, and that's why God declares them to be so, is because he's all-knowing and smart, then that implies that there's a standard above God that he's subordinate to. And so I'm making a similar claim about art. I am saying that art is not great because you and I declare it to be so. I'm saying that if we were wiped off the face of the earth tomorrow, you and I, and we both thought Shakespeare was a great writer, he would still be great even if we were wiped off the face of the earth. That his greatness does not supervene on our saying he's great. It's actually the reverse. We have looked at his literature. Critics for generation after generation after generation, college professors, teachers, readers of all stripes, have seen that Shakespeare's plays contain the formal elements, the stylistic elements, the themes that make his work great, and that's why we declare it to be great. So it's not entirely subjective, and it's great anthropocentrically, meaning that there might be some silicon-based life form that Shakespeare is not great for them. So it's relative to only one thing, and it is the type of creature that we are. Shakespeare is a great writer to human beings that share a nature with us.
Sure, yeah. I mean, that's kind of where, I agree with you. I agree about, like, Shakespeare. But, I mean, there's definitely someone who could kind of, sort of flip that and say, well, okay. Which, do you think, like, or, well, let me just, I could say that, because I'm looking for something kind of more specific. So is it because, like, the themes are more...
Why is Shakespeare great?
Well, hold on. Before you answer. It's like, is it because, do you say it's great because its themes are universal to human nature? That's, I would say that. But then I could go around and say, Stephen King here, I don't know if you've read Stephen King, but, there's Stephen King here, and he writes about, what brings us together, what scares us, and there's even stuff in his work I think is just as profound. So, would you say, because, you were talking about based on, like, genre, with, like, Grisham. Could profundity be found in a King novel in the same way it could be in a Shakespeare play? I guess is...
Yeah, I just think to a lesser degree. If you would say to me, and look, this Britton is why we debate about things. If it was entirely subjective, you and I having this debate, there'd be no point to it. There would be no point in us having this debate if the matter were entirely subjective. So yes, I think that Stephen King has those qualities. I would say that if you think, and again, I don't think we should be stacking Shakespeare up against Stephen King in the same way that I don't think we should be judging Mexican restaurants against Italian restaurants. They're playing a different game. They're doing a different thing. They have different telos. So, meaning telos, purpose, nature, or function. They're trying to do something different. So, for example, a great cheerleader, okay? If the purpose of cheerleading is to excite a crowd at a football game, there's one way of being a cheerleader that makes you a great cheerleader if that is the telos of cheerleading. If cheerleading is an athletic competition like a la Bring It On. Have you ever seen those movies, Bring It On, where the girls are like in cheerleading outfits and they do these contests where they're throwing each other into the air?
The first one a long time ago.
And there's dance choreography. That's an entirely different type of cheerleading. It's closer to gymnastics or, choreographed dance. That is a different telos. There's something different that it means to be a good cheerleader in that context. But if you want to do this, if you want to rank order them against each other, I wouldn't want to do that, because I think that rational people make genre discernments, make teleological discernments. But still, if you want to talk about why Shakespeare is a great writer and why I personally don't think Stephen King is as good of a writer, this might offend you, Britton, because you may be a big Stephen King fan. I'm really not. I think Stephen King's works will be largely forgotten in 100 years.
I've heard them all, so Phil, say what you want.
I don't want to offend you because I know people like really just love Stephen King with a fervor that I'll never understand. But I think he'll be forgotten in 100 years, and you don't. And you think that he'll be a mainstay in the same way that Shakespeare will be a mainstay, which he will be. And I just disagree with that. I think Stephen King writes himself into a corner and has a really hard time ending his books.
I agree with that.
I don't think
I'll give you that.
What's that?
I'll give you that.
I don't think they're well paced. I think they're crass and oftentimes uncouth. But again, these are he's playing a different game than Shakespeare is. I wouldn't hold him to the same things that I would hold Shakespeare to. I would rather pit Shakespeare against Ben Jonson, or Edmund Spencer or whatever, or Philip Sidney.
Okay.
Like
I'm like, I've
I
never
just
heard of Ben Jonson before.
I just wouldn't. Yeah, like reasonable, rational people make established criteria. It's essentially a rubric. I have a different rubric for horror novels than I do for the the kind of theater, the kind of drama that Shakespeare is doing. His genre is different. I wouldn't stack. I wouldn't pit Stephen King against Shakespeare. All I'm saying, let's boil it down to its most simplistic thing. All I'm saying is that you like Stephen King, Britton, because of the formal elements and universal themes in his works and the extent to which he's capable of delivering upon those. Let me list a couple for you. The caliber of his plots, and the way in which they're able to keep you excited, turning the page at all hours of the night, hanging on the edge of your seat. You like him because of his characters, how multifaceted they are, how real they feel, the fact that they have this internal qualia that makes them just feel so alive when you read them and you're able to empathize with them. So it's things like plot and characters and control of conventions of language. And my only argument is that it's not arbitrary or subjective. Stephen King actually does do these things well. And there's a reason why so many people love his works. Now, you think he's greater than I think he is. I think he'll be forgotten. But I'm going to give him credit for being a talented author. What's that?
I disagree on that.
That's fine.
I mean, I guess the sort of the contention I would have with that is, I agree that I don't think art is just a subjective thing, that it's arbitrary. It's just like, oh, it's just up to the ether. Like, no, I think there is something that makes something timeless. Like Shakespeare, for instance. I think
so. We agree. We agree. We totally agree. Then
no. I agree. I'm just saying I agree with you, but I think there's like some nuance there that
Me too. That's why I made like a 40-minute video about it. And I could have made like 10 more, but people will not listen to that much content.
No, it's just like the point I'm trying to make is I think it does not need to matter what genre or how, I don't know, trashy it might seem. I think good stories will last, is what I'm trying to say. And maybe you agree with me, and we just have different views on what that means. But
I think we largely agree. I think good stories will last. For me, Stephen King has a lot of problems when it comes to his. That's my. And look, it's not subjective, and because it's not subjective, I could write a paper. You and I could sit down and we could write essays. My essay would be that Stephen King is not going to be remembered in 100 years, and here's why. Your essay would be about how Stephen King's stories will last, because his stories are good and they're timeless and they're crafted in such a way so that they resonate and are compelling to us as human beings. And notice, we are both going to populate our essay with evidence from his works. Sure. You're going to write paragraphs and you're going to make claims and you're going to back them up with evidence from his books. You're going to give examples from his books. You're going to talk about his greatest stories, and you're going to talk about his greatest characters, and you're going to talk about the themes that animate and enliven his works and develop his stories. The evidence that we give is going to be, it's not subjective. It is based on what he's done.
So you're saying that
Our judgment of his work comes down to how he's put his work together.
So okay, so you're saying that art is not subjective because, well, like you said, how it's made, but also what the content is, what it's about.
In the same way that, yes, in the same way that the structural integrity of a building is not subjective.
Sure.
In the same way that a well-constructed, well-made bridge is not, it's not a matter of subjectivity. I'm making a natural law argument. And all I am saying is, in the same way, the extent to which, for example, it is not a subjective matter that if I made a film and it's just me staring at the camera going for 2 hours, okay, if I do that and then I give you Godfather 2, it is not just a matter of subjectivity. And if everyone in the world said, no, we actually like the one where Jordan's making goat sounds into the camera for 2 hours, they would be wrong.
No, I'm not. I hope I'm not like frustrating you.
No. This is my style of
I'm liking this. It's just like
no. Me too. This is just the way I. No disrespect at all. Obviously,
okay.
that is the way I engage in intellectual debate. I'm an animated. It's my Jewishness. I get verklempt. It's how my whole family is, actually.
No, it's just, I just think it's I don't know, it's just kind of so what you're saying essentially, I'm going to try and dumb this down a little bit, is that you think that art is not subjective because A, how it's made, and B, what it actually entails, what it talks about. Like if you could say Shakespeare is good because he deals with timeless themes of what it means to be human. And again, Shakespeare, that's a whole thing. Is that like you could use evidence from that work, from how it's made and from what it's saying? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. It's Shakespeare, as you said, is a because of Shakespeare's control, his command of the language, his use of his mastery of figurative language, his cognitive power, his ability to tell stories that give rise to themes that are utterly central to the human condition. I mean, one of the foremost, most popular literary critics, Harold Bloom, wrote a book called Shakespeare, The Invention of the Human, The Invention of the Human. Yeah. And his argument is that Shakespeare has essentially authored our modern conception of who we are as people. That he is Harold Bloom thought that one of the things that made a work of literature great was its idiosyncratic strangeness, by which he meant an author's the way in which an author writes in a fashion that is idiosyncratic. And I can almost give you a direct quote here. It is literature that so assimilates us that we cease to see it as strange. Okay, so it is the kind of literature where after 2 lines you know who the author is. So he thought that Shakespeare was so fundamentally powerful, that his stories were so archetypal and so nuanced and so fantastical and so deep and so somehow also so familiar. Characters were so well-rounded and three-dimensional and so varied and so interesting that his command of the language. I mean, my God, Shakespeare's plays. Just pick a Shakespeare play, and that play gave rise to an entire movement of thought. Hamlet, Do we even get to postmodernism without Hamlet? Macbeth. Do we get existentialism without Macbeth, right? That tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day until the last syllable of recorded time, and all our yesterdays of lighted fools their way to dusty death. Out, brief candle. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player who struts and frets his hour upon the stage and is heard no more. It's a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing.
But
That is existentialism, man.
no,
I mean,
I agree with you. But I agree with you, and I agree with Bloom. But on that note, where there is that kind of pit. I like to call it the pitfall of snobbery. Now, I'm not gonna try and. I'm not saying you're snobbish or anything, but I mean maybe you.
Oh, I am though.
Oh yeah, you probably would say you are, and that's fine. But I would say, because I remember Harold Bloom said that Stephen King, like a few years ago, he had like a national. This was like a decade ago. He had like a national book award, and Harold Bloom got mad at him, or not mad at, or mad about it. And he basically said that like Stephen King is not literature, whatever. But what I would say to that is, like if you read his work. And it has its flaws. I agree with you on its flaws on that. But you cannot tell me there isn't something that is timeless about his work.
Oh yeah, we just disagree on that. So look, man.
That's kind of where I take issue with the.
You shouldn't though.
It's the kind of pitfall of the objective argument, because
no, it's not.
Or hold on, let me finish real quick.
Go ahead.
Let you go. But it's like so, and this is just a devil's advocate argument here. I'm not saying I agree with it, but you could say that So you're telling me that Stephen King does not have themes that are as timeless as Shakespeare? And what you said earlier, if you get the idiosyncratic, you can find that in Stephen King too.
I would disagree with that. Listen, though, I think you're making the mistake, with all due respect, because I think we largely agree on this. It's just a very minor distinction. You're making the mistake that most people in my comment section made. Okay. Which is the claim that the fact that someone would disagree with any given claim that, say, I make invalidates my whole theory. Well, okay. In my world, and again, the theory that I'm espousing is like one of the oldest and most common theories. I mean people are.
I don't think you're wrong.
No. People are just moral and aesthetic relativists today, so they're amazed and they're shocked when I make this argument that art isn't entirely subjective. Look, one of the most common arguments that I hear is, well, the thing about it is, Jordan, is that some people will disagree with what you like, and yeah, Britton, listen, one of us is wrong, and it might be Britton, it might be me. On the Stephen King question, the mere fact that we disagree about Stephen King's greatness doesn't mean that there isn't an answer to that question. Either I'm right, or you're right, or the matter lies somewhere in between. It is very possible that I'm not right, and that you have me beat, and that you end up making the better argument at the end of the day. And when we have our essay writing competition, we put our essays out in the New York Times, side by side. Who's right? It may be that you end up making the better argument. One of us is right. Either Stephen King is a great author whose works are timeless, or they aren't. And perhaps you'll be right. And perhaps that you're right about, look, and there's only one way of you being right, and it's if you accept my theory. If you're a subjectivist, there is no right or wrong. The only way you can be right that Stephen King is a great author is if you accept my theory of aesthetics. Then you can be right. If you're a subjectivist, then neither of us is right because the matter's purely subjective. There is no right or wrong about this.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm not saying... Like I said, like you said before, I think we mostly agree. Like there is like Oh man, my head's spinning now.
But you get what I'm saying, right?
I get what you're saying. It's just like I get again. There's the little nuances. I guess. Like you know.
If you're right about Stephen King, then I'm right about my aesthetic formalism.
Well, sure. Yeah.
About my view of aesthetic formalism, because that means that there is a truth of the matter, and it's not a purely subjective matter. Otherwise, it would be impossible for you to be right. Okay, and I'll read you a quotation. I really want to read you a quote that's perfect for what you just said, and I have to look it up now. Here it is. This is Nick Zangwill writing in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Ready for this? Okay.
Oh, okay. Shoot.
It's common for people to... What's that?
No, I just said shoot. Just,
Oh, okay. Yeah. Where is it? There it is. He says, it's common for people to say there's no right and wrong about matters of taste. 2 points ought to embarrass the relativist. In the case of judgments of beauty, relativist theory is wildly out of step with common practice. As with moral relativism, one can virtually always catch the professed relativist making non-relative judgments of beauty. For example, in their judgments about music and everyday household objects, relativists do not practice what they preach. Secondly, one thing that drives people to this implausible relativism, which is so out of line with their practice, is a perceived connection with tolerance or anti-authoritarianism. This is what they see as attractive in it. But this is upside down, for if it's all relative and no judgment is better than any other, then relativists put their judgments wholly beyond criticism and they cannot err. Only those who think there is a right and wrong in judgment can modestly admit they might be wrong. What looks like an ideology of tolerance is in fact the very opposite. Thus, relativism is hypocritical and intolerant. That's my argument.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't disagree. I agree with you. That's what I'm saying. Again,
yes,
I think
you're on my team.
No, it's just like I don't know. It's I feel it's funny. What's weird about like discussions and like debates like this is it kind of feels like you're running in circles after a while. Which is
I feel like I'm in the same place.
Which is why I never really took to because I did debate team for a while and I hated it. But I mean, I like discussion, but it just kind of. I mean, it's not that like. Look, I agree with you. I think there is.
You must, because you're claiming Stephen King is a great writer, and that his works are so great that they'll be timeless, and that we'll always love them. So you agree with my theory.
I do.
I'm happy to have you on my team.
No, I do. It's just I I don't know anymore. But I guess what I'm trying to discuss is I think that maybe it's just like that, at the end of the day, even though, I like Harold Bloom, I think he was a great critic. I think he was an excellent he knew what he was talking about, I guess, to keep it simple. But
he's a great writer. Yeah.
He was. But at the same time, there is that he was just a guy at the end of the day. Now, I'm not saying this is subjective because he makes a lot of great arguments about what made certain books good or bad. But my thing is, I guess sort of what I'm trying to say here is I agree with you. I think that it can sometimes lead to being short-sighted, if that makes sense. Does that make sense at all?
Only not in the sense that I think some people are saying that my theory entails more than it does. My theory doesn't make me right about any given author. I could be wrong about all of my judgments, and I could be just the biggest idiot in terms of what I judge to be great literature and what I judge to be bad literature. And the same goes for like films and stuff like that.
Well, sure, yeah.
So my theory doesn't mean that I'm right about any of my judgments. I could be irrational and I could have bad taste. And in fact, your taste could be better than mine. I'm just saying that there is a truth to the matter.
Yeah, no, I
That's
agree with
all
that.
my theory holds, is that it's not arbitrary and subjective. We're not just making this stuff up. We actually use our reason and we establish criteria and we make rational judgments. We place art in context and we make judgments about its quality. I mean, my goodness, if the opposite theory to ours, because now I've found you kind of agree with me, if the opposite were true to what we believe, then boy, students should get up and protest their high schools. They should get out of their seats and walk out of school anytime their teacher gives them a grade, because that grade is arbitrary. But the thing is that it isn't, because teachers have an essay assignment has a telos. There's something that this essay is supposed to do. In a lot of my students' essays, I'm judging the extent to which they're capable of making a rational argument that is sound, meaning that the premises are true and the argument is valid, meaning that the conclusion is guaranteed to follow from the premises. If the premises are true, the conclusion has to be true. That they're capable of making claims, backing those claims up with airtight arguments using reasoning and evidence, and that they're capable of using rhetoric to persuade, and they're capable of controlling the conventions of language. And so I make a rubric that rank orders their ability to do that. And so I make a rubric and I tell them, here's the rubric, here's the assignment. And the assignment is that I'm checking to see if you're capable of doing this with language. And the students write their essay, and I see if they really were capable of performing that task. And I give them a grade. And some students are better essay writers than others. And boy, this isn't that hard. I was amazed at the level of just sheer overwhelming anger that my video produced. And I don't think the argument is that controversial. And I think that actually the majority of people would agree with it if they had it explained to them.
No, I mean, I agree. I guess I should explain how I think of it. 'Cause generally, I'm on your side. Like, I agree. But my thing is not, I don't want to say genre is arbitrary, because I don't think it is. But my thing is, it doesn't matter what genre a story is. It doesn't matter what medium it is, what inkling it is. If a story has something that is timeless, something that can be true for any generation after ours, and even before ours, that's great art. That's just what I think.
Yeah, hey, that's a great. We're pretty simpatico on that. Like,
Yeah.
what you're acknowledging there is that the extent to which it is true that Stephen King is or isn't a great timeless writer is an anthropocentric truth. These are truths that are true because of the kinds of creatures we are. So you say there are all these books, and what matters to you is whether they're timeless. Whether or not they're timeless means that will they resonate with creatures that share our nature, creatures even that exist 1,000 years from now, because our nature hasn't changed. If you took someone from ancient Greece and you gave them adoptive parents in 2023 and raised them in, I don't know, heck, Brooklyn, New York, they'd be normal Brooklynite kids when they grew up, teenagers, whatever, young adults going off to college. Our nature hasn't changed. And so I fundamentally agree with your point on that. But listen, I do kind of have to wrap it up, because
Okay. Yeah,
I'm at the point now where if I go to bed now, I will be able to get, right now, if I went to bed, I'd be able to get 8 hours of sleep just right now. But I'm all worked up now,
Sorry,
so now I need to go have a beer and get to bed soon.
All right, I'll wrap this discussion up, and then we'll wrap this up. But I guess what I'm saying, and I think you would agree with this, is that why is Shakespeare a great writer? Because he discusses human nature in a way that anyone can relate to. It doesn't matter if it doesn't appeal to you or not. Like, I've met people who Shakespeare doesn't appeal to, and I totally understand. Language is archaic. It's not easy to read. It's definitely you have to kind of have some context there. But at its core, once you understand the story, what it's
Right.
saying,
Right.
anybody can relate to it. It doesn't matter if
100%.
it doesn't matter if you're you or me from America, or it doesn't matter if
We
you're
agree completely on that.
somebody from Iraq, or
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Iraq.
100%.
Sorry,
No,
Iraq.
100%.
I'm just picking on him today.
We agree on this. Complete and total agreement.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's just like if I could meet someone who culturally is completely alien to me, and we can agree there's something in this book I can relate to on some fundamental level, then I think that's art. You know, that's what I think.
Yeah, I love that. And that's a really nice way of rounding out the discussion, because I think that, no, really, that's I totally agree with your perspective there. No one's saying Shakespeare is an easy bar to clear. One of the amazing things I find, I don't know if I told you this, I'm a high school English teacher.
Yeah, I knew you were a teacher.
And
where?
Yeah, I teach at a charter school in Massachusetts. It's an advanced charter school for intellectually advanced students who lean towards math and science, but we have a great English department as well. And so I teach literature and AP literature and philosophy and film. But I have found that even with my 10th graders, who even among the ones who find it very difficult in the beginning to read Shakespeare, once they get used to early modern English, because as you said, it's kind of a high bar to clear. They're not used to reading it. And so whether it's Old English or Middle English and it's Geoffrey Chaucer, or whether it's early modern English and it's Shakespeare, there's a little translation that has to happen. Mm-hmm. And so they get the Folger edition and they make meaning of it and they struggle with it. And once they get used to it, I find that once they're through the first act and a half, once they're act 2, scene 3, once they hit act 2, scene 3, something like that, they're in a groove. And it starts to make more sense. And we read it together in class and all of that. Gosh, do they love Shakespeare. If it's taught well.
It's great.
It's exactly what you're talking about. It has to be taught well. It has to be, you have to live up to Shakespeare. You have to work your way up to him. And that's what it means to have taste, to have faculties of taste. It isn't easy. A really amazing wine that is a $10,000 bottle of wine that is aged, that is grown with the finest grapes in the most amazing fertile region of France or whatever, or some bourbon that's just aged for 20 years in these sherry casks or whatever it is. Yeah, like a 13-year-old's is going to spit it out when they taste it. It's going to be disgusting to them.
Yeah.
Their palate isn't refined. They don't even know what it means to look at Shakespeare. They don't know what bourbon is supposed to taste like, or what good bourbon is versus bad bourbon. A 13-year-old would like cold duck better than that $10,000 bottle of wine. Doesn't mean the 13-year-old is right. In fact, they're wrong. They haven't been educated yet. Their palate isn't refined. So, and I mean, think about it. Like, I don't like mushrooms. But there's a difference between saying that I don't like mushrooms and that mushrooms are bad to eat. I don't like James Joyce. I cannot stand reading James Joyce, but he's a brilliant, genius, timeless writer who is one of the greatest writers who's ever lived. I don't like his works, but I don't like something is different than saying that something is bad. Great is different than I love it, in other words.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's the longest I'll go is usually 2 hours, because there was some that got really long, but I've enjoyed this a lot. We should do this again at some point.
Oh,
Um,
me too.
uh,
And maybe because so many raving, angry people, all I want is respectful comments in my comment section. Like, just respectful disagreement. Just be nice to me, and like I'll leave your comment up forever. I may not even
you
have
can just
time to
send them over
respond
to
to it.
this video here whenever I
Yeah,
put it
yeah.
up.
I think I'm actually gonna do that. I think I'm gonna post a link to this video in the comment section, or maybe I'll make a follow-up video, and I will just maybe show a clip from this or something. But I think sometimes you just got to sit down with people and talk the ideas out.
Sure,
But
yeah.
I really appreciate talking about it with you, and maybe you'll come on my channel at some point.
Yeah, no, this has been fun. Sorry, I've kept you. I usually go for like the longest I'll go is about 2 hours, so this is about fine. So, but yeah, thank you. This has been fun. Also, if you do end up doing that, you can do that. I'm fine with that. Just let me know. So I won't
Okay.
just like randomly find it and be like, this motherfucker stole this from me. Yeah, he didn't even ask me. I would be probably fine with it, but I've been like, I'd probably just be like, I wish
Of
he'd asked
course,
me.
I would ask you.
But
It's your content. It's your content. It's your
um,
channel.
yeah, no, but last thing I'll do here is if you have social media or anything like that, feel free to share it here. So, and then we'll wrap
Oh,
it up.
what are you asking me?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, you could follow me on Facebook. I have an Instagram now, but I don't really know how to use it. Twitter's a hellscape. So no Twitter. Let's not do Twitter.
You mean X?
I mean, I like Twitter, but yeah, I have a private account on Twitter, but it's not for the channel. Um, and yeah, so what else? Tip your starving booktuber on Patreon, and check me out at IWizard. And just thanks for having me on, Britton.
Oh yeah, like I said, let's do this again at some point. Maybe I'll have a
You
book.
got it.
Sometimes I'll have book discussions, and we'll do that. But yeah, anyway. Yeah. All right. Yeah, this has been good. You can find me on Twitter and Goodreads and Letterboxd, where I write reviews that are probably more coherent than the one you just heard right now. And also I'm on Discord. So yeah. Anyway, Jordan, thanks for coming on. I'm gonna get something to eat because I'm hungry. So yeah. All right. Take care.
All right. Ta ta.